Yeah, Sherelle, this is the first part of what is going to be a three-part teaching on what is clean and unclean to us as the Most High's set-apart people. The nations of this earth and those of us that walk in uncleanness with them accepts and eats anything which is unclean, but our Father Yehovah has given unto us specific instructions as to what is clean and what is unclean insofar as what we eat. This pertains to the animals, even down to plants and trees. So we're going to be going through Wayikra, aka Leviticus, to touch on these. It is also touched on again in Dabarim, what is also called Deuteronomy chapter 14. But for the sake of this, we're going to deal with Wayikra chapter 11. So I'm going to begin reading now. And Yahuwah spoke to Masha and to Haran, saying to them, Speak to the children of Yasharal, saying, These are the living creatures which you do eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Whatever has a split hoof, completely divided, chewing the cud among the beasts that you do eat. Only those you do not eat among those that chew the cud, or those that have a split hoof. The camel, because it chews the cud, but does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. And the rabbit, because it chews the cud, but does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. And the hare, because it chews the cud, and does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. And the pig, though it has a split hoof, completely divided, yet does not chew the cud, it is unclean to you. Their flesh you do not eat, and their carcasses you do not touch. They are unclean to you. These you do eat of all that are in the waters, any one that has fins and scales in the waters, in the seas or in the rivers, that you do eat. But all that have not fins and scales in the seas and in the rivers, all that move in the waters, or any living being which is in the waters, they are an abomination to you. They are an abomination to you. Of their flesh you do not eat, and their carcasses you abominate. All that have not fins and scales in the waters are an abomination to you. And these you do abominate among the birds. They are not eaten. They are an abomination, the eagle and the vulture and the black vulture, the hawk and the falcon after its kind, every raven after its kind, and the ostrich and the nighthawk, and the seagull and the hawk after its kind, and the little owl and the fisher owl, and the great owl, and the white owl, and the pelican, and the carrion vulture, and the stork, the heron after its kind, and the hopi, and the bat. And all flying insects that creep on all fours is an abomination to you. Only these you do eat of every flying insect that creeps on all fours, those which have jointed legs above their feet, with which to leap on the earth. These of them you do eat, the Ahabath locust after its kind, and the Solam locust after its kind, and the Hargal locust after its kind, and the Hagab locust after its kind. But all other flying insects which have 4 feet are an abomination to you. And by these you are made unclean. Anyone touching the carcass of any of them is unclean until evening. And anyone picking up part of the carcass of any of them has to wash their garments and shall be unclean until evening. Every beast that has a split hoof, not completely divided, or does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. Anyone who touches their carcass is unclean. And whatever goes on its paws, among all the creatures that go on all fours, those are unclean to you. Anyone who touches their carcasses is unclean until evening. And he who picks up their carcasses has to wash his garments and shall be unclean until evening. They are unclean to you. And these are unclean to you among the creeping creatures that creep on the earth, the mole and the mouse, and the tortoise after its kind, and the gecko, and the land crocodile, and the sand reptile, and the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Anyone who touches them when they are dead becomes unclean until evening. And whatever any of them in its dead state falls upon becomes unclean, whether it is any wooden object, or garment, or skin, or sack, any object in which work is done, it is put in water, and it shall be unclean until evening, then it shall be clean. Any earthen vessel unto which any of them falls, whether it becomes unclean and you break it. Any of the food which might be eaten, on which water comes, becomes unclean, and any drink which might be drunk from it becomes unclean. And on whatever any of their carcasses falls become unclean. An oven or cooking range, it is broken down. They are unclean and are unclean to you. But a fountain or a well, a collection of water is clean, but whatever touches their carcass is unclean. And when any of their carcasses falls on any planting seed which is to be sown, it is clean. But when any water is put on the seed, and any part of that such carcass falls on it, it is unclean to you. And when any of the beasts which are yours for food dies, he who touches its carcasses becomes unclean until evening. And he who eats of its carcass has to wash his garments, and shall be unclean until evening. And he who picks up its carcass has to wash his garments, and shall be unclean till evening. And every swarming creature, the one that swarms on the earth, is an abomination. It is not eaten. Whatever crawls on its stomach, and whatever goes on all fours, and whatever has many feet among all swarming creatures, the ones swarming on the earth, these you do not eat, for they are an abomination. You do not make yourselves abominable with any swarming creature, the one swarming, and do not make yourselves unclean with it, lest you be defiled by them. For I am Yahuwah, your Elohim, and you shall set yourselves apart, and you shall be set apart, for I am set apart. And do not defile yourselves with any swarming creature, the one creeping on the earth. For I am Yahuwah, who is bringing you up out of the land of Mitzrayim, to be your Elohim, and you shall be set apart, for I am set apart. This is the Tula of the beast and the birds and every living being, the creeping creature in the waters, of every being that swarms on the earth, to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the living creature that is eaten and the living creature that is not eaten. Selah. So Yasharal, why doesn't Yahuwah want us to eat of these things? Well, you see the very strong words that he uses. He says they're an abomination. Why are they an abomination? Because many of these animals serve a purpose, and one of the purposes that they serve is to clean the earth, to rid the earth of things that die upon the earth, other animals, and things that would sit around and rot. In the ocean, some of these animals also serve a purpose as well, to the balance of things. But there are also other animals that are an abomination, that are of another kind, and we will touch on that in another teaching. But it's important that we realize that in order for us to be set apart, that there are things that we have to do. The various religions out there, Christianity and all the others, tell you that it's okay to do so many things. And one of the things that is taught is that it's okay to eat just about anything. Well, it's not okay to eat anything. The Most High has set these principles in line for us. They were set before he set us as his people, and before the foundation of this creation of the earth and of man. And so therefore we see that even in the account of the flood account, we see that the Most High spoke unto Noah and said unto him that he should separate the animals that are clean from the animals that were unclean, and this for a reason. So, we cannot just take bits and pieces of things and decide to keep and decide to throw away. Everything is connected, cannot be separated, and has to work the way it works in righteousness before the Father. These things were not given unto the other nations of mankind or to the other nations of man. They were given unto, these oracles were given unto Yahuwah's people, of which we are to teach these to the children of men. And so it's important that we, at this time of our awakening, and that those of us who seek to be in that remnant which will come out, that we keep Yahuwah's statutes and commandments as he has laid out to us. So until the next part of the part 2 of this presentation, see you on the next one.